Canto 6, Chapter 4, Text 46. 6, 4, 46. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Tapo me hridayam brahmams tanur vidya kriya kritihi angani kratavo jata dharma atma sava sura tapo me hridayam brahmams tanur vidya kriya kritihi angani kratavo jata dharma atma sava sura. Tanur vidya kriya kritihi Ladies, please. (51 to 54). What happened? This where the mark was, 46. Huh? They were done yesterday. No. If yesterday's verse was 46, then why is today's verse 51? They did 46. They did Saturday and Sunday, 2 days. Oh. 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 Text 46 was discussed Saturday, and some other verses, apparently. You did that many verses? 46 through 50? Huh? Well, just a comment. From 46 to 50, just listen. From 46 to 50, it's like 10 pages. You covered 10 pages in 2 days? They're long purports. I'm surprised, but surprise is not new. We're going to change gears. And this morning, we're going to discuss text 51 through 55, right? 51 to 55, is that right? 54, 51 to 54. That's the end of the chapter. Okay. Well, since we've already chanted a verse for 46, and that wasn't for today, I'm just going to read the translation for 51, etc. Oh, my dear son Daksha, Prajapati Panchajana, Prajapati Panchajana has a daughter named Akshini, whom I offer to you so that you may accept her as your wife. Now, did I read the right verse? That was 51. Yes? Okay. 52. What? But I read the right verse, 51. Okay, now comes 52. Now, unite in sexual life as a man and woman, and in this way, by sexual intercourse, you will be able to get hundreds of children in the womb of this girl to increase the population. Purport by Srila Prabhupada. The Lord says in Bhagavad Gita 7:11, Dharma viruddho bhuteshu kamosmi. I am sex that is not contrary to religious principles. Sexual intercourse ordained by the Supreme Personality Godhead is dharma, a religious principle, but it is not intended for sense enjoyment. Indulgence in sense enjoyment through sexual intercourse is not allowed by Vedic principles. One may follow the natural tendency for sex life only to beget children. Therefore, the Lord told Daksha in this verse, quote, this girl is offered to you only for sex life to beget children, not for any other purpose. She is very fertile, and therefore you will be able to have many children as you can beget. Paragraph. Srila Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur remarks in this connection that Daksha was given the facility for unlimited sexual intercourse. In Daksha's previous life, he was also known as Daksha. But in the course of performing sacrifices, he offended Lord Shiva, and thus his head was replaced with that of a goat. Then Daksha gave up his life because of his degraded condition, but because he maintained the same unlimited sexual desires, he underwent austerities by which he satisfied the Supreme Lord, who then gave him unlimited potency for sexual intercourse. It should be noted that although such a facility for sexual intercourse is achieved by the grace of the Supreme Personality Godhead, this facility is not offered to advanced devotees who are free from material desires, and yabilasha shunyam. In this connection, it may be noted that if the American boys and girls engaged in Krishna consciousness movement want to advance in Krishna consciousness to achieve the supreme benefit of loving service to the Lord, they should refrain from indulging in this facility for sex life. Therefore, we advise that one should at least refrain from illicit sex. Even if there are opportunities for sex life, one should voluntarily accept the limitation of having sex only for progeny, not for any other purpose. Kardama Muni was also given the facility for sex life, but he had only a slight desire for it. Therefore, after begetting children in the womb of Devahuti, Kardama Muni became completely renounced. The purport is that if one wants to return home back to Godhead, one should voluntarily refrain from sex life. Sex should be accepted only as much as needed, not unlimitedly. Final paragraph. One should not think that Daksha received the favor of the Supreme Lord by receiving the facilities for unlimited sex. Later verses will reveal that Daksha again committed an offense, this time at the lotus feet of Narada. Therefore, sex life is the topmost enjoyment in the material world, and although one may have an opportunity for sexual enjoyment by the grace of God, this entails a risk of committing offenses. Daksha was open to such offenses, and therefore, strictly speaking, he was not actually favored by the Supreme Lord. One should not seek the favor of the Lord for unlimited potency in sex life. 53, translation. After you give birth to many hundreds and thousands of children, they will also be captivated by my illusory energy and will engage like you in sexual intercourse. But because of my mercy to you and them, they will also be able to give me presentations in devotion. 54, Shukadev Goswami continued, after the creator of the entire universe, the Supreme Personality Godhead Hari, had spoken in this way, in the presence of Prajapati Daksha, he immediately disappeared, as if he were an object experienced in a dream. Well, the puzzle of Daksha's personality continues. Daksha, elsewhere in this section, it said he died of embarrassment, because previously he was very, very beautiful. I mean, a beautiful man. And when he lost his head and had a goat's head, it wasn't so beautiful. He was ashamed. Doesn't say specifically that he was ashamed of his offense. He was ashamed of having a goat's head. So his propensity for offense wasn't removed. The process of atonement for sin counteracts the reaction of the sin, but it doesn't take away the tendency to sin again. And what to speak of offense? According to Bhakti Sandarbha of Jiva Goswami, there are these two categories of obstacles and subcategories of those: sin and offense. Sin has the category of reaction to sin, and reactions to sins are neutralized by atonement process. But the atonement process doesn't take away the tendency to do the sin again. On the other hand, bhakti has the potency not only to remove the reaction to sin, but even remove the tendency. That's discussed at the beginning of this chapter. The whole canto, Prabhupada chose the title, Prescribed Duties for Mankind. Prescribed duties for mankind. So the ultimate prescribed duty for mankind is to awaken dormant Krishna consciousness, and thereby even sinful tendency is taken away. The story of Ajamila is narrated to indicate exactly that. And although Ajamila, was freed from the reactions of his sins by calling the name Narayana, his bhakti wasn't matured. And therefore, when the Vishnu Dutas left, he went to Badrinath, resided in a Vishnu temple, and perfected his life of devotion. So Namabhas is not sufficient for going back to Godhead. Namabhas is sufficient for giving one freedom from reactions to sins and all those good things. It can establish one on the platform of liberation, but one can slip from the platform of liberation also. Now, in this case, Daksha is a bit of a puzzle. And that is, on the one hand and on the other hand. On the one hand, his affinity was for karmakanda rituals. And on the other hand, when he wasn't satisfied with the fruit of his karmakanda rituals, namely when he married and had children, they didn't satisfy what he understood was the purpose of bearing children, he then went this Hansaguya prayers, and Lord Vishnu came. So, to what degree was Daksha a devotee, and to what degree was Daksha a karmakandi? Well, certainly there's a mix, and enough that Lord Vishnu came and said some very nice things, but he hadn't achieved perfection. And the perfection was missing in that he still had this intense desire for sex indulgence, which was the main point of the purport here. Now, what about question? Akama sarvakamo va mokshakama udaradi tivrena bhakti yogena yajeta purusham param. What about that verse? Because according to that verse, Tivra Bhakti has the power to lift Daksha-like people that have Sarvakama to the platform of pure devotional service. Well, the fact of the matter is, Daksha didn't have Tivra Bhakti. If he didn't have Tivra Bhakti, why did Lord Vishnu come? Well, he doesn't need a reason. He was pleased, and going back a bit, the purpose of creation was being fulfilled through Prajapati Daksha. And what's the purpose of creation? Going back and back and back, the purpose of creation is Mahavishnu's desire that living entities will have at least the opportunity to experience the fullness of happiness. There's no guarantee that that's going to happen by taking birth or taking birth in a human form. But the opportunity is there. And the whole of the Vedic culture is to nurture or nourish that opportunity. But many people don't see the purpose of life and even the Vedas as facilitating that purpose. They see it in other ways. According to what Krishna says in Bhagavad Gita, and what many religions also say, the purpose of scripture, or the purpose of religious life, is 3 steps. Gain punya, prosper in this life, and go to heaven at the end of this life. In Krishna's words, most people think there's nothing more than this. And it's true, most people think there's nothing more than this. Now, there are some rare people that think there is something more than this, but generally it stays within that boundary. And apparently Prajapati Daksha was one who was within that boundary, because his affinity was for not Tivra Bhakti, his affinity was for Karma Kanda. And he was expert. He was Daksha. So he still had material affinity, specifically these two. The affinity to become angry and make offense, and the affinity to desire unrestricted, or not unrestricted, sex desire that knows no boundaries. So he was given a wife who was very fertile and had the capacity to bear many, many, many children. Sure enough, she did. And he could engage in sex indulgence without, counting. And so those offspring that were produced, they had some purpose. They had the purpose of filling up the universe. And some of those offspring, the daughters later became the wives of great rishis, sons of Brahma, and then they helped populate the universe with different species. And then a number of the sons, a big number, 10,000 and then 1,000, they became celibates. Now, it's very interesting, the last thing that Vishnu says at the end of the chapter: after you give birth to many hundreds and thousands of children, they will also be captivated by my illusory energy and will engage like you in sexual intercourse. But because of my mercy to you and them, they will also be able to give me presentations in devotion. Doesn't spell it out, what were those presentations in devotion, but they had, they're mixed. They had some bhakti, or at least the fruits of their activities were offered to the Supreme in a karma yoga sense, doesn't specify, but offerings to the Supreme. So perhaps that was karma yoga. Perhaps it was preliminary stages of bhakti yoga. No detail. Like what happened to those 10,000, 1,000 sons, we don't hear. We don't know. And those that didn't remain brahmachari but did become involved in household affairs, we don't hear so much about them, other than the offspring of different species, etc. We don't hear a great deal about that and how they made presentations to Lord Vishnu. We don't hear too much about it. Just he's just mentioning it. So they're elevated, as is Prajapati Daksha. In one sense, a great personality. In another sense, an apparati. So great personalities can become apparatis. And they bear consequences for those apparats. According to, again, Bhakti Sandarbha, eradicating the reactions to sins is far more swift than overcoming reactions to offense. That is to say, anarthas are more troublesome, more stubborn to overcome than reactions to sins. So it doesn't mean no problem, go ahead and sin, just don't make offense. We don't do either. But we should know that offense is a very serious matter, and the reactions to offense is a very serious matter. And we're carrying, according to Jiva Goswami. We're carrying them from one life to the next life. They're carried by the soul as the soul transmigrates. Karma is carried, and anarthas are carried. And they're not in the same category. Anarthas are far more serious. It's still a puzzle, why somebody like Daksha, because it's very clear in the purport, in his last life, this is who he was. This is what he did. And in this life, with great austerities, he had the facility to have unrestricted sex life, as much as he liked, but for one singular purpose. For producing good praja, which is what Prajapatis are interested in, what a virtuous person is interested in. But good praja then has there's degrees of good praja, or there's a degree of an elevated person. And the standard of gauging the elevation is the exclusiveness of bhakti. So again, back to the title of the canto, Prescribed Duties for Mankind. There are prescribed duties. Sometimes there's a question, maybe you've been asked this question. How does one know what is one's prescribed duty? You ever been asked that question in a Bhagavad Gita class or Bhakti Shastri discussion? One way of answering, someone shared with me a very nice discussion with Satchidananda Swami, describing, some of you may know, he's been planning this for like 15 years, of a institute. He has a name for it, I forget what the name for it is, but it's helping people that aren't devotees connect with the bhakti process. And so he couches the training and education in simple language. And I think it's something like he calls it the tree of life, something like that. So here, just say quickly, there's swadharma, which means, just like in Bhagavad Gita, one's inclination for work, according to guna and karma, specifically according to guna, but inclination for work. Like, one becomes very enthused to do something. Business people like doing business, and musical people like doing music, and they get really energized, and if they really get absorbed in that activity, they become proficient. So acting according to one's nature, swadharma. Then he uses this term, mana dharma. Mana dharma, he uses this term to indicate moralities, ethics, like compassion, nonviolence. Don't do your swadharma in such a way that you harm people. No, it's human virtue. Manadharma, he calls it. And then the third feature, and the perfection needs to align all three, and that is Sanatana Dharma, or that the personality of Godhead is to be pleased by those two. In other words, don't just be charitable, but orient that charitable disposition, connect the charitable disposition with service to the Supreme. I know a wealthy doctor who's now retired from his medical profession, and he likes giving charity, but he's like an active person, so he's spending more time that really he should be spending in making investments. Probably, I don't know the detail, but probably something with stocks. Very volatile, up and down, and so forth. And the profit that he makes, he uses in charity. But so charitable disposition, it's an elevated quality, but charitable disposition that isn't connected for the pleasure of the personality God, it falls short. Or another example. I remember seeing in a train station in a city in China a billboard that was like, as big as that whole back wall, like gigantic billboard. And I couldn't read it because it was in Chinese, but I asked, what does it say? And it's just encouraging that people should be charitable. Because in China, it's a value that's within the people. It's part of their culture. They're very charitable. But where's the connection with that charitableness with the Supreme? It's managed to maintain itself over the whatever long periods of time because it's a value that is propagated from the teachings, Confucius and Lao Tzu and this one, that one, and people read about it and it's part of the culture. But the God-centeredness is missing. So in due course of time, guaranteed, in due course of time, when God-centeredness is missing, there's going to be a drift. And what being charitable looks like. Guaranteed. So the prescribed duties for mankind, back to Canto 6, there are these three. And there are people like Daksha that are inclined towards one kind of dharma, but not so well connected with paradharma. And the Bhagavatam is giving us a picture of compare, contrast. Here's paradharma, like Narada, paradharma. And over there is Daksha, mixed. He's interested in what he's interested in, his swadharma. Religiously performed, for producing good praja, he fell within those boundaries. But his paradharma is poor. And because of that, pride, offense, and over-attachment to his, using Prabhupada's phrase, your sex indulgence. How is that sex indulgence propensity going to be purified? It's purified not just by following codes of Vedas, stay within some boundaries, but it's by bhakti. Now, fortunately, very fortunately, Narada gave his association to Daksha. What we don't hear in the whole story connected with Narada being cursed by Daksha is each time Narada delivered the the Haryashvas and the Savalashvas, he went to inform Daksha, hey, here's the good news. Your son's just joined my bhakti program. First time, Daksha didn't say anything. Second time, he said, why did Narada go back, knowing that this is what's going to be his behavior? The answer is, he wanted to deliver him. So he tolerated the insult, and he just stayed. He didn't get up and walk out. He stayed. Why? Because why did he come to begin with? Same reason he stayed. He wanted to deliver him. We don't hear what that deliverance was, but that's Narada's mission. He gives bhakti, even to people like Daksha, even to offensive people. I mean, he does it wisely. And certainly there was some anger from Daksha and pride, but his response wasn't the same as Lord Shiva's. He didn't chop off his head or have the demon that was created by Lord Shiva chop off his head. He wanted to deliver him. And similarly, last point, this is like Lord Chaitanya, where the offenders were killed by Krishna, but Krishna delivered the offenders. The Jagais and Madhais and Chandkazi, and he delivered them. And like Narada. So there are role models. Now, we're not powerful like them, but the principle that they displayed is meant for us. And, it's right in the 6th canto Bhagavatam, prescribed duties for mankind. This paradharma, that's our ultimate prescribed duty. We should understand swadharma and manadharma, and Sanatana Dharma often is used to imply varnashram system, our duties dedicated to the pleasure of Vishnu or Krishna. But Sanatana Dharma, that's the Bhagavatam's message. Okay, let's see if there's some discussion. And sorry for reading the wrong verses, because the bookmark was where I began. Comments or questions? Okay.
Yeah, that Kamosmi Bharatar Sava, Dharma Aviruddha. If Viruddha, and then what happened? Dharma Aviruddha, Kamosmi Bharatar Sava, Lord saying in
Yes.
Bhagavad Gita. And if Viruddha, that means if Aviruddha means is not against the religious principle.
Not what?
Not against the religious principle.
Not against religious principles.
Yeah. And if Viruddha, then what happened? Is it karma no more, or they are fall down in the
They're
Hades
just
condition?
not implicated in sinful reaction. Doesn't mean karma no more.
Mhm.
It means it's without sinful reaction. It doesn't mean karma is taken away. That answer your question?
Yeah. So I want to understand. If not, and then karma is not existence, or
No,
if,
that's your question. The answer is it's not that karma is taken away by following religious principles.
no, yes. And then another question, like you mentioned, this mankind actually dharma is sanatan only. Hamsaguya dharma mean this all this chapter is mankind dharma.
Yes.
Exactly what is Hamsaguya give the I missed some of
What
the
exactly
verses.
is the Hamsaguya prayers? It's honoring the personality of Godhead. It's bhakti, like, at least. So he had some bhakti, but it wasn't Shuddha bhakti, Mishra bhakti.
Misra.
And the Lord knew, and the Lord fulfilled his mix desire. He showed himself, that's the bhakti, and he gave him the facility for fulfilling his desire. Sometimes, I mean, the discussion we had Friday evening about King Nriga. The host, by the way, he's a very nice devotee and has a community of people that he's been with for years. Asked, why he didn't go back to Godhead. Why King Nriga, after he got delivered, why didn't he go back to Godhead? He was touched directly by Krishna. He had material desires. Even if those, by the touch of Krishna, the reaction to the offense that was done to the Brahmanas, where the accidental offense, the reaction was gone, but the material desires were there. It's a little bit like your question, the first one. So depending upon, proportionate to the strength of one's bhakti desire means to please Krishna. Depending upon the strength of one's bhakti desire, then other desires will be taken away. Bhakti has that power. However, our immersion in bhakti, or wanting to please Krishna, makes all the difference. Like, a sadhaka, sadhana bhakti, and stages of sadhana bhakti, and then bhava bhakti, prema bhakti. Stages of bhakti, the strength of the proportionate to the intensity of our and focus of our desire to please Krishna. Pure devotion is there's very strong desire to please Krishna. No, like in deity worship, or like in chanting, or like in anything that's a direct devotional activity. Someone can be a pujari and their mind is in the gutter while they're performing puja or offering arti or something. And they don't get the same effect as someone who is fixed in the principle that here's a wonderful opportunity. The Lord is very kind. He's giving me this opportunity to directly serve Him, etc., etc. Big spectrum in absorption in the bhakti principle, even when doing the same activity. Bhakti has the power to deliver one completely from lust or any material tinge of any kind. But it may or may not do that depending upon the focus of devotion within the field of that activity. The activity is under the care of the internal potency, but if our consciousness is distracted, even while engaged in devotional service, the effect isn't going to be complete. So we need to be very focused. Or become. Anything else?
Maharaj, I have one more.
Okay, fine.
My understanding, maybe I misunderstand that verse. Akamo sarva kamava moksha kama udaradi. That verse,
Yes.
tibrena bhakti yogena.
Yeah.
Maybe I misunderstood. I don't know. That means after doing the devotion of the Lord Vishnu, and everything will fulfill. Akama means no desire, and then sarva kama, whatever the desiring, and moksha kama, who wants liberation, only is possible by the Vishnu bhakti. Is that correct, or how?
Yes.
You understand?
Yes, it's correct. No, the qualifier is tivra bhakti, not just sadhana bhakti, or beginning stages of sadhana bhakti, but tivra bhakti. And a nice verse from Canto 5, Chapter 19, where it is said, the Supreme Lord, when fulfilling the desires of his devotee, doesn't fulfill those desires in such a way they'll come back and petition the Lord for those desires again. Rather, he'll remove those desires. Their desires are fulfilled, but the desire itself is removed in favor of his lotus feet. That's how he does it. He gives his lotus feet that removes the desire, but the prior desire is fulfilled, like Dhruva gets his kingdom. Or Nriga gets his heavenly planet. Or now the Kuvera and Manigriva go back to being sons of Kuvera, and so forth. Okay?
There's a question from YouTube. This is from Divyambara Devidasi Prabhu.
Okay.
It says, Hare Krishna Guru Maharaj, please accept my humble obeisances, all glories to you and Srila Prabhupada. May you please let me know how one can get out of offensive mentality as it is detrimental to one's spiritual life. What are the steps one needs to take to stop offenses if one is headed in that direction? Thank you.
Well, how to and the steps. How to is the force of the instruction to do so, and a willingness to receive the instruction with your receiver on. And there's power in the instruction to do so, and you can get the full benefit of that power by having your receiver on. That means a desire. So that the embedded in your question is there's some desire. Then the instruction is not weakened by somebody's not having a strong desire to get out of offense, but the power or the potency is received by the intensity of our desire. In other words, what Rupa Goswami's nice verse, the one qualification needed to enter into love for Krishna is one's, he uses the word lolyam, but you soften it and becomes your eagerness. How eager are you? And then it doesn't, the instruction has the potency. It's over and over and over, instructions and stories, and then over and over, how important it is to avoid offense. Because offense spoils everything. Even something good becomes spoiled by offense. So it's poison. So don't drink poison. And the strength to not drink poison comes from your eagerness to overcome offense. In the steps, it's just degrees of reminding yourself or being reminded, or combination, and you keep moving in the right direction. You replace that offense tendency with a better tendency. Practice. That's the step. Anything else?
Yeah, there's one more question from Facebook. It's from Archana Vaidya Prabhu. I don't know her initiated name,
I do.
sorry. Yeah. Hare Krishna Maharaj, in verse 44, we learned that Daksha's desire is aligned with Lord's desire that is of happiness of the living entity, which is pure devotion, as per my understanding.
Yes.
But he has desire for enjoyment as well, which is mixed devotion.
Yes.
Can you kindly elaborate on this seeming contradiction? Thank you.
It's not a seeming contradiction. It's mixed. just like air and air pollution, or water and water pollution. I was hearing somebody describing they like rivers, and they're living in New Jersey, and they went for a walk by the Hudson River, and it smells like a sewer because there's so much pollution that goes into the Hudson River. It's not that, the river water is one thing, and the pollution is another thing. So mixed is mixed. It's not a contradiction. Water is pure. Bhakti is pure. And then there's a mix. And that's, consciousness that's misdirected by choice and by conditioning. Not a contradiction. Anything else? Yes.
Thank you, Maharaj. Thank you. Actually, you just posted, and it's referencing Srimad Bhagavatam recommends this is the one-stroke remedy for getting rid of all unwanted bad habits from the hearts, and that is hearing the Lord's name and pastimes constantly from the lips of the pure devotees. Our heart is cleansed of all contamination and becomes calm and peaceful. And it quotes the Srimad 1:2:18.
Fantastic. Thank you. Srila Prabhupada ki jai.
Holiness Prabhupada Swami Maharaj ki jai.